Doyin, you build. And I know you're someone who is very passionate about affordable housing. Is it really achievable in the light of what we know people earn and purchasing power, access to opportunities for this? And also, if you could also reflect on how this affects, different genders, when you now look at bringing collateral for loans and all that. But is affordable housing even possible in Nigeria? Are we there? Is that a conversation that we can start to have now? And please also speak about the transportation issue.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Derisu. And I quite agree with Will about the transportation challenges we have in Abuja. I think, yes, we have a great master plan, but we don't have access. All over the world, people don't live in the central business districts. They wake up in the morning, they take about 30 minutes commute to their work, and they take it back. So that's about an hour commute every day. But it's predictable, right? You get there by 6 a.m., the train or the bus is there, and you come back home about the same time. The challenge for us is that we need mass transit system, right? Because we have a lot of great satellite towns. We have Kuje, for instance, like Will said. Gwagwalada is just 55 minutes away from city center. That is not far at all. That's about 20, 25 minutes commute every day, right? But the problem we have is the standard of living in those environments are really poor, right? So there's no security, there's no access to water, the roads are bad, no healthcare system, no education. So everybody sort of comes to the city center because everyone deserves good standard of living. But let's leave that aside. Talking about affordable housing, I think it is possible. We just need to be a bit creative about the solutions, right? There are two factors, two C's we consider when it comes to affordable housing. The first is the cost factor. We have the land, we have the cost of materials, we have the cost of labor. In Nigeria, the only thing we have going for us is the cost of labor because of our population. We have so much supply such that we can have labor affordable. But land is really difficult to acquire because all of the land belongs to the government, right? And until we have policies, good policies, sound policies in place, we can't really tweak much about the land conversations in Nigeria, right? So what we have to play with is the cost of materials and also like the cost of labor. And the theme today is tagged, Face Me, I Face You. I think the problem with that type of architecture is the execution. I don't think there is anything wrong with the model itself, Face Me, I Face You, because all over the world, there is co-living. It's just a simple concept of co-living. I still live in an environment in New York this year, a co-living environment where we shared basic resources. The problem with that architecture is the execution, where you don't have good ventilation, you don't have good planning, you don't have drainage, water, you don't have sanitation and hygiene considerations when you're executing the Face Me, I Face You concept. And we also need to know that Nigeria is not as rich as we portray it. Most of us want to have luxury, but we don't have money. In the UK, the average size of a bedroom is 3 meters by 3.5 meters. That's about 9-10 square meters. But in Nigeria, you want to sell a product to someone, and the person is asking you for a 25 square meters size of a room, but you don't even have the money, right? We're talking about a UK environment that's got mortgage, that have a very productive environment, low unemployment, and mortgage is about single digits, about 2-3% you can get mortgage and pay for 30 years. But in Nigeria, where we don't have all of those factors, we want luxury. So we need to reevaluate our priorities, our expectations on housing. And going back to affordable living, you see most of these tech companies that have grown in the last 5-10 years have leveraged on the sharing economy. You see Uber, you see Airbnbs and the likes. Things are growing, so there's nothing wrong with sharing, right? But I think there's a lot of cultural constraints with the challenges. For me, when I get a piece of land, what I want to do is maximize it to the best, right? I'm not thinking about luxury. People ask me, Doyin, when are you building terraces, when are you building duplexes? There are a lot of people who don't have homes, so when I have a land that I bought for 50, 100 million naira, I can't afford to just build 2 homes. I want to max it out to have 12, 16 apartments there. But unfortunately, not many Nigerians are also embracing that kind of culture. So there is a need to orientate people, right? Education, awareness, that we're not as rich as we think. Because when you think about the multi-tenant kind of apartment, then you can begin to reduce costs. Another factor with cost reduction is the building materials. We need to embrace alternative use of materials. If you remember sometime around March this year where our currency was devalued, that easily translated into hike in construction materials. I was buying cement before then for 4,800 naira, but around March, April, it went to 11,000, 12,000 naira per bag. Reinforcement Y12, about 4,800, went to 13,000, and we still need to survive. So we need to move away from these materials that are heavily dependent on foreign exchange, right? And we have these materials in Nigeria. We have wood, we have bamboo, we have laterite. For laterite, we can use that for stabilized earth blocks, right? But what we find out happen in Nigeria is that we prefer to export our raw materials without refining them. Where the value comes in is in the refining, right? And that's the same problem we're having with our crude oil today. Because we have these raw materials, we prefer to sell and import. So most of the building materials are imported. That's very, very wrong, and that's where the problem is. So let's imagine the government is not even giving us land for building, because I believe the government should be giving us land directly, those who can develop. There are different metrics you can set in place and parameters to really check that these developers have capacity, but let's imagine that the government is not even doing great work. We ourselves must utilize the available and easily accessible construction materials. Stabilized earth blocks just needs a little bit of cement and a lot of laterite, and that gives you an eco-friendly property, right? People are using bamboo across the world. If you go to South Africa, you see bricks being used. Even in the UK, that is wealthy, they use bricks. But for us, we still think luxury. I think most of our challenges are around the cultural issues and values. I feel it is possible if we embrace this creative thinking in housing. Thank you.
You've talked a lot about, reducing cost of materials and, innovative ways of thinking about that. Given the fact that we have a really big problem with building collapse, standards, what measures should be put in place as we reflect on this to ensure that we are also protecting people from harm,
Unfortunately, the only measure we have to put in place is self-regulation, right? Self-regulation. If I'm spending 200 million naira to build a house, I should be the last person that wants the house to collapse, not the person regulating me. So, but we have very warped values in Nigeria, and that's where it starts from. What do I gain when my building collapses, right? I always tell myself, I should be able to live in this house. So it starts with values. We need to reevaluate our values as people of Nigeria. Every time we point fingers at the president, at the people in government, but for you living in the face me and face you apartment, are you doing the right things, for instance? So I would say self-regulation, because no matter how much you get externally regulated, once you don't have that check within yourself, you won't get things right. But I also think that the regulators should leverage technology to reduce the issues of corruption, because that's also a big problem. For instance, in my first project, a simple information as knowing the land use acts for the land, for the property, which means, can I build 1, can I build 10, can I build 50? I had to ask 5 times in the same institution, and I got different responses. A simple website where I can put in my CFO and it generates the land use would have solved the problem. So technology takes away a lot of these corrupt practices. So those 2 things, self-regulation and leveraging technology to reduce corruption, will be the way forward. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much.
So for me, I would say women should think more about ownership, right? Think ownership, ownership, ownership. Unfortunately, just like the land surveyor mentioned, we have a lot of issues around the land system in Nigeria. But for me, I personally don't do lands that don't have good title deeds, because that's your proof, you understand? The land is money as it is. So even if it means 50 or 100 of you are coming together to put money together, please focus on lands and properties that have good titles and think ownership. I think globally it's just about 15% of women that have property to their names. So one of the challenges we have in Africa is not just a housing problem, it's an economic problem. We are not as productive as we should be. So even if all the houses were available to be bought, we don't have money, you understand? So think about what can give you leverage, and that's by investing in property with good titles. And you can make micro investments as a group. So you need to prioritize, change your priorities. When you gather as a cooperative, as an organization, right, focus on the most important things. Ownership, you understand? The more women start to own properties, then it begins to change the narrative. So when women own properties, then I'm sure they wouldn't be denying other women from renting their properties. So I think ownership is the way to go. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think this session has been very interactive. We'll take pictures quickly. And you know, it just reminds me of the typical face me, I face you life. There's always disagreements. But thankfully, this is face me, I face you, and not face me, I slap you. So let's keep the conversation on. Lots of ideas have been brought up here, and that's the point of this whole session, that we'll leave here with solutions to these challenges. So thank you once again to our moderator and the panelists for dealing with this face me, I face you matter. Just to add that the PIC, that's a host of a Gender and Inclusion Summit 2024, would appreciate feedback from all of us, all the participants in this session. And to do this, you can scan the QR code outside, or you can meet any of the ushers to get the QR code, or go to the feedback stand where the research assistants can support you, or the digital screen. So there are lots of options.